Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lily and this is the episode 5 of my knitting podcast. In the previous episode, I had 1 finished object and 3 works in progress. In today's episode, one of those works in progress has become a finished object and the other 2 has been worked on quite a bit as well, so I do have progress to show. On top of that, I also casted on a brand new work in progress. Spoilers, I'm probably not going to continue it, but it is something to talk about, so I will also include that in today's episode. So without further ado, we still have 4 objects, that's not very little, let's get started. So the only finished object for this episode, which was a whip in the previous one, is the Stockholm Slipover V-neck version by Patons. I made a size large with 1 strand of Patons classic worsted wool or classic wool worsted, one of the 2, in the shade Pansy, and I used 3 balls, which is around 300 grams. I cannot remember how many meters, but I will type the yarn I used in the description box in all of my videos so you can go down there and look it up yourself. It is a worsted weight wool, it is 100% new virgin wool, I believe. It has a more rustic and textured finish compared to smooth merino, but so far I don't find it too scratchy. It might be a bit too scratchy if you're going to make a sweater out of this, as in making something that will be directly on top of our skin with no layers in between. But for something like a vest and maybe a cardigan, I think this is a perfectly good wool in terms of texture and scratchiness. It is a true purple, slightly on the cool tone side, but definitely not blue. I do not know why my camera is trying to show it as blue. It is genuinely so much more purple than that. I will insert a picture taken with my phone of the finished object so you can see what it actually looks like in real life. But I will also try to color correct this footage to the best of my abilities, which might not be too effective because I'm new to editing and all that, but I will try my best. Either way, moving back to the pattern itself, the Stockholm Slipover is obviously in the same collection, I guess, as the Stockholm sweater, and I have talked about this in the previous episode. There is a major difference between the Stockholm Slipover and the Stockholm sweater, that being that the sweater has body shaping, like body decreases down the side, and the Stockholm Slipover has none. But other than that, they are pretty much of the same construction. You knit the back panel and then back panel all the way down to the armholes. You do the armhole shapings in the process, and then you pick up stitches on either side of the cast on edge of the back panel, and then you knit down while doing the shapings for the front panel. You join at the end of the collar, and then you continue, and then you join the front and the back together at the underarms, and then you just keep knitting it around, and then you do the ribbing, you do the bind off, you come back and pick up stitches and do the ribbings for the collar and the sleeves. This one doesn't have sleeves, armholes, but you get what I mean. The Stockholm sweater, which is also one of my whips that has been laying around in my other apartment and not being touched at all in the past 3 months, it is also of this construction. It does look significantly different, but I feel like that is just my personal yarn choice. I believe the recommended yarn for the Stockholm Slipover is 1 strand of fingering weight yarn with 1 strand of lace weight yarn, so that's usually 1 merino and 1 mohair. And first of all, that is much more pricey than a singular craft store skein of, well, not a singular skein, but a singular strand of craft store wool worsted yarn. And since it is a vest, I don't quite care about the quality of the wool. as long as it is wool, I think color is a bit more important on something that is not going to be on your skin and therefore doesn't quite affect your comfort. And also, on a personal note, this is only one of the gifts that I will be giving to my friend when her birthday happens. So I don't feel like putting in $150 on a singular vest. That is really expensive, even for finished object like store-bought clothing standards. But either way, I don't use mohair in my clothes in general because I just know I hate it, and I think most people actually will find it really scratchy. I made a sweater number 15 for my mom before that also had one fingering with one mohair as the recommended yarn, and I did follow that. And I tried on the finished object, it was so itchy I had to take it off in like 3 seconds. My mom handled it a bit better, mostly because she asked for it and she cannot take back her words as easily. But she also found it a bit too scratchy, and if I could go back in time, I would have chosen to either choose a completely different alternative sport weight yarn or just went in with a pricier cashmere that will bring much more comfort. But with all that irrelevant rant aside, I think I was talking about how my Stockholm sweater and my Stockholm slipover look significantly different. I think the other reason is that I made the Stockholm sweater sleeve ribbings much longer. I made it like this long, which I don't think is what the pattern says. It might be, I'm not sure. But the slipover definitely just doesn't have sleeves. So I think it's not going to look too coherent as a set, but that is perfectly fine with me. I'm never gonna be wearing both at the same time. I don't think anyone will, considering one is a baggy sweater and one is a wool vest. So this truly doesn't bother me, it's just a thing to ponder upon. Why does the sweater has shaping, why does the vest doesn't? Why are they in the same family? But with all that aside, I think the Stockholm vest, Stockholm slipover, is a pretty decent pattern. So it looks very neat. I think the lack of body shaping is actually pretty ideal because, first of all, the ribbing sort of cinches the body in already. If you can see here, it does form kind of a balloony shape. That is unideal by me, but also since this is not too oversized, when we wear it, it sort of just gets stretched out by our body and no one really sees it. So that's good. And I have always liked the boxy fit for vests way more than I do for sweaters. I also do prefer the boxy fit for sweaters, but I feel like for a vest, it's like there is no better alternative. Sometimes for sweaters, I think it will look better when shaped. For vests, rectangular for the win. And also, I think the specified ribbing length written by the pattern is pretty decent. So for once, I actually did follow all the recommended lengths for the ribbings, and I think it looks very coherent. So this is what the armholes and the collars look like. I'm pretty sure this is 9 stitches, and for the body, it is roughly like 1.5 inch, maybe 5 centimeters. And that is what the pattern has specified to me, and I think it looks great. Like, this vest is very basic. It is all over stockinette, 1x1 rib, v-neck. It is the standard of standards for vests, but I feel like every single turn and line and edges on this vest look intentionally designed, which is a great thing when it comes to a pretty basic wardrobe staple-ish sort of pattern. I feel like this is what you get for most store-bought vests, or actually even better, because I feel like the recent trend for store vests has been really baggy and really oversized and really drapey, and I don't know how I feel about that, but I definitely do feel happy with the vest that I did recently finish. The one thing I wasn't too happy about though is just how off gauge I was. Now for this one, I did do a swatch. I swatched, and the way I swatch is by casting on. So usually they specify gauge by telling you how many stitches should be in a 10 by 10 centimeter square of fabric. And so I don't actually remember how much this is supposed to be. Let's say it's 20. So if the pattern specifies 20 stitches times like 28 rows or whatever, that means if you cast on 20 stitches and then you knit for 28 rows, you should get a perfect 10 by 10 square. And the way I swatch is I cast on 2 more stitches than the specified, just to account for the end stitches that tends to go to the side and account for thickness rather than length. And then I don't really care about the row gauge. It is really basic. If my row gauge is off, I can always just knit more or knit less rounds. And I just knit until it is roughly a square looking thing, and I cast it off, and then I block it and I measure it. So with the method that I do things, my supposedly 10 by 10 square was 9.5 by something, and that is not 10 by 10, and that would definitely explain why mine ended up being much smaller than what the pattern has suggested it will be. But I was mostly on gauge. I'm going to argue that I was mostly on gauge, but the supposed bust circumference for the size large of this vest is 105 centimeters. Let me fact check. 105 centimeters, and I just measured it, and it is 49 centimeters long when laid flat, which means it is at most 100 centimeters when you measure it in the round. That is 5 centimeters off, and I guess I should have paid more attention when choosing the size to knit, because I guess a large, which a 105 for a large is not oversized by much, and I did really want a oversized fit for this because that is what my friend prefers in her wardrobe. 105 should still be oversized, 100 is not quite, especially if you wear a shirt or something underneath. It sort of does already cinch everything in. It's not a bad look. I tried it on and I actually liked how it looked on me, but it is not what I expected, and I feel very mixed about that. It could be my fabric choice. I actually think that it very much was my fabric choice. If you have that strand of mohair, it's going to be way less inwardly elastic than pure wool. So since I made mine in pure wool, whenever I try to stretch it out when blocking, it just goes back in, since it is so elastic as wool yarn usually are. So the sizing is quite off for this piece, but otherwise I think the pattern is great. I think the yarn is a nice affordable 100% wool option for things like vests and cardigans, and I liked how the finished object looks on me and also in general as a piece. So if I were to make this again, I would definitely size up to an extra large, which should not be a size that applies to me in most circumstances, but I guess if you're modifying the fit of something away from what is intended, that is what happens. So that's my finished object for this episode, the Stockholm Slipover v-neck. And moving on to 3 whips, 2 of which you have seen before and 1 of which is brand new. I'm gonna take a drink break. Alright, I am back, and I'm going to start talking about my whips, which honestly are kind of fun. So I'm going to start in the same order as I did in the previous episode. I think I showed the Camisole number 9 first, so I'm gonna show it now as the first whip I have. This is the Camisole number 9 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. I just realized that, just like the previous episode, 3 out of 4 of the things I will talk about are from My Favorite Things Knitwear. I do have a love for her pattern, but After I finish all of my whips, I promise I will diversify my designer selection and discover more indie and smaller designer patterns. But regardless, I think the Camisole number 9 is a really great pattern, just like all the other patterns I have knit from her. This is a really basic tank top construction that I've talked about last time. You cast on a tiny few number of stitches for the straps, and then you knit for the back and front panels as you would a regular sweater or vest, and then you join around and then you continue knitting. So last time I said that I wanted to do the neck and armhole hems, but I didn't have the 2 centimeter needles 2 millimeter needles required for doing that, so I'm going to put this on hold. Now it is still on hold, but for a different reason. So while I was in Europe, I actually bought a pair of 2.0 millimeters metal needles, and I was able to use them to finish the neck and armhole hems. And then as I was doing that, I put this project on my bed and I accidentally sat on it. So my main needle has snapped. Straight up like snapped off. So I have one intact needle, and that is the stub, like the metal part of the other one. It doesn't want to focus, but you can definitely see that there is nothing here. And that is the only pair of 2.75 millimeter needles I have in Boston. I am going back to Montreal soon, and I'm pretty sure I have another pair of 2.75 millimeter needles over there, so I can keep working on it without having to buy needles. But for now, it is on hold because all the hems are done. Well, not all, there's the bottom one, but of course I need to finish the body first. And I cannot finish the body because I don't have an entire pair of intact needles for that. But regardless, I have made much progress compared to when you have last seen it. I think last time I was at just over 1 ball of the yarn I used. Oh, by the way, the yarn I used is Knitting for Olive No Waste Wool in the shade Slate Green. It is a 50% recycled wool plus 50% extra fine merino wool, and it is 50 grams for 225 meters, and that makes it a pretty standard fingering weight yarn, and I do use fingering weight wool yarns for my summer garments. So last time I talked about it, I just finished 1 ball, and I'm pretty sure I was somewhere here. Well, actually, yes, I was here because I made 0 progress on the body since I next worked on the hems, and during the hems process, I broke my needles. So what changed this time is that there are folded in stockinette hems for both the neckline and also the armholes. Now these are really special hems. I said folded in, they're actually folded out. So when you're picking up stitches, you are picking up on the wrong side. So if I were knitting, this is what you would see. That is the right side, the side facing me is the wrong side. And once I picked up all the stitches, I would flip this entire garment over and start knitting it in the round. So what that creates is basically the reverse of the main body. You have the right side on the inside, so when it's time to fold, you fold it outwards. And you also actually bind off first in a pretty regular bind off, where you just take the previous stitch over the most recent one, and then you slip it off and continue going like that. You don't need a stretchy bind off or anything, it's a pretty regular bind off. And then what you do is you take a tapestry needle and your the yarn that you're using for everything else, and then you sew the pickup edge with the bind off edge. Now, this is where I realized I could have done that for my T number 1 as well. The T number 1 is my finished object for the previous episode. I have talked about it in the last episode that it also had this outward folding and then sewn down collar design, but I didn't do it because in the T number 1 pattern, it was recommended to use the lace weight strand of the working yarn to do the sewing, and I didn't have a lace weight in my working yarn. I didn't use 2 strands held together. I just chose a regular fingering, which I thought would have made the collar line much more bulky than intended. So I just chose to not do it at all and did a regular inward folding and then sewn down while being bound off collar. This one straight up told me to use my working strand of fringing weight yarn to sew it down. So technically, I guess that proves I could have done it for my T number 1, but also it is a really chunky edge. As you can see here, the edge is like 3 rows thick. Like this one edge is equivalent to like 3 rows over here. So it is a really substantial edge. I think it looks really great on this tank top because there are literally no other features, and there are also very little fabric, so having something substantial should balance the overall design out. But for the T number 1, I think if it looked the same, which it probably would have because the instructions are virtually the same, I feel like this will be too bulky of a line on the collar. With all that said, I'm planning on making more than 1 T number 1s. I'm going to make it in a separate color, and when I do that in the future, I will definitely try to do the outward folding collar for the feature line on the collar edge. And we will see how that goes. I honestly don't know if I'll like it. I'm trying to imagine right now, and I think I will, but it will be different from the stock images. But I will probably still think it looks good, but that's also all very far into the future. Turning back to the thing I'm currently talking about, the collars were not too hard to figure out. The pickups were easy. For once, it was not a struggle to get the 2 armhole pickups to be the same number of stitches, and it was a really quick, really fast knit. The tiny 2mm needles give it a really neat and tight finish. And the sewing down process is described in enough detail in the pattern. It was not like the most you could have said about how to do it, but it was easy enough to figure out. So basically, the way it describes how to do this is you take your needle, so this is basically quote unquote, you go up in the 2nd stitch, go down in the 1st stitch, go up in the 3rd stitch, go down in the 2nd stitch, etc. So basically what you're doing is you're making tiny loops that pulls the bind off edge and the cast on edge together. And every time you do the up or down motion, you're stabbing your needle into both the cast on and the bind off edge, which is not specified on the pattern, but I managed to figure it out, so I guess it's not too difficult and didn't quite need specifying, but it would be nice if it were specified. But anyways, I'm making a size medium for this, and it currently looks tiny because it is meant to have a negative ease of like 15 centimeters or something. And for me, that would be like 70 to 75 centimeters as the finished object, which this doesn't look too far off from. I cannot quite show you the shape because right now there's a odd tangle of circular needles that I did to prevent the stitches from slipping off the needles, the broken needles, nevertheless. So I cannot quite like extend this and show you how it looks so far, but I'm pretty sure there's also no body shaping for this camisole as well. So it should just be a really tubular piece of garment that relies on the large negative ease to show all the curves of your torso, which I think 15 meters of negative ease is definitely enough to achieve that. And I am actually looking forward to see how it will wear. The no-waste wool is a tiny bit scratchier than the merino wool, but I feel like I will wear the Camisole number 9 more as a layering piece than a standalone summer piece. So hopefully when I wear it in the fall and maybe even in the winter, it shouldn't give me any trouble anymore. So once I go back to my own apartment, I would be able to work on it again, and I probably will. So I am looking forward to having this finished object before the end of autumn, let's say, which is a pretty loose deadline. And the dark green is a really versatile color for my wardrobe, so that adds to the excitement. But since I didn't do too much on this, there's not too much to say, and we can move on to my second work in progress, which I do have quite a bit more progress. Maybe not more exciting, but definitely more progress. So I have over here the Camisole number 4 by My Favorite Things Knitwear again. I promise this is the last piece by her in this entire episode. The Camisole number 4 is a triangular strapped tank top, or I guess you wouldn't call it tank top anymore, just a camisole. The way you make this is you knit the triangles in the front first, and then you knit the triangles on the back, and then I guess you continue knitting a bit on the back before you join all 4 triangles in the round, and then you just keep knitting in the round. There's once again no body shaping for this, which makes quite a bit of sense because it is 2x2 broken rib, and it would be kind of weird to fit in a decreasing seam on the side. I have made one Camisole number 4 before. I used the Knitting for Olive Merino in the shade Dusty Artichoke, and it was a much brighter green than I expected when the order got to my place. It was still beautiful regardless, and I do always have projects in mind when I order yarn, so I made it regardless, and I did wear it quite a bit. But I still want something that is more versatile than the, I guess, too bright color of Dusty Artichoke. So I made this one in Knitting for Olive Merino again, but this time in the shade Midnight. This is a cool-toned dark gray yarn. It's showing up mostly accurate on camera, maybe a bit less blue. I don't know why my camera is showing everything as super blue, maybe because I am super red. But it is a cool-toned gray, really dark cool-toned gray, which makes it more versatile of a top, I guess. I can wear this with basically any jeans, probably not jeans of the same color, but I don't own any anyways. Any jeans, and also of my other pants that are either green or beige or black or things like that, and I feel like I will get quite a bit of wear out of this. So this was also the piece that I took on my Europe trip with me. So I worked on it quite a bit on flights, at the airport, when I was really tired after one entire day out and resting in the hotel and all that. So the progress has been substantial. Last time I showed you, it was literally just this corner, just this tiny corner right here. And right now I have joined in the round and knitted that much of the body. So I would say that I am either around halfway or more than halfway done. Actually, I know I'm more than halfway done because the first Camisole number 4 took me 2 balls of the merino, and right now I am already in my second ball. I was going to do the I-cord straps before I joined the second ball onto the body, but then I forgot. So right now I am once again I eventually will be once again under the stress of, did I leave enough yarn to finish the I-cord straps? Usually the answer is yes. The one time I made this specific camisole, the number was yes, but I still wish I did it differently. But Well, I guess I could always just cut it off and then do the straps and then join back on, but then that's one extra end, and I'm a person who believes in minimizing ends just for my own mental satisfaction. So I still work on this quite a bit, not nearly as much as when I was away in Europe, because right now back home I have way more things to keep my hands occupied. But I made quite a bit of progress. I actually made quite a bit of progress today. I made maybe like an inch of fabric because I went to downtown Boston via the metro, and the MBTA is something to be cursed. I spent, I think, 2.5 hours on total back and forth on the metro. It was not a great time. I think there was like coordination issues, and then on my way back, someone got onto the tracks and I had to get them off and this and that. But either way, it did give me time for knitting, which is a good thing out of the bad. All that to say that there is quite a bit of progress on this. I think I would be able to finish this very soon. Maybe not in the next episode, because once I get back home, I still have all of my currently on hold whips to care about. I have the reading cardigan for my partner. I have the Stockholm sweater that I have to decide what to do with, and so on. So I cannot promise that there will be a finished second camisole number 2 in the next episode, but hopefully there will be more progress made than there are today. Going back to talking about the generic pattern and not my own specific project, I am starting to forget how to speak after half an hour of recording straight. But either way, this is a 2x2 broken rib pattern, texture, whatever you call it, as I have mentioned in the beginning, making it not as boring to knit on as a regular stockinette, which is why I was willing to cast it on twice. It has the triangular constructions as I mentioned, it has no body shapings, and I think the recommended positive ease was 0 to 5 centimeters or something around that, and I opted for a bit more and made the size medium, which is supposed... Never mind, I opted for so much more positive ease that I made the size large, which is supposed to have a bust circumference of 96 centimeters, which should give me like 5 centimeters of positive ease. And the recommended ease is it negative? Yeah, the recommended ease is negative 2 to 5 centimeters. So I just size up a size basically, and since I've already made one, I just know that this will work. I made my first camisole number 4 in the size large, and I really liked how it fits. It basically looks like something with 0 positive ease, so it doesn't quite cinch around my body and wrap me, but it also doesn't like drape and flow, which kind of translates into this is the perfect fit for me personally. So I have no other concerns about the finished object other than nothing really. I'm just really excited to have this finished piece in my wardrobe. This is one of the knits that I am doing more for the object than for the process. Some knits I do for fun, some I definitely do to have this as a wardrobe piece. This is kind of both, leaning towards the I want the object side. Oh, also a fun fact, you can definitely wear the camisole number 4 inside out and not notice. I'm pretty sure I've done that once. This is what it looks like on the wrong side. So as you can see, the knit columns become purl columns and sinks back in, and the broken rib columns become this sort of like scratchy, almost waffle pattern, and it also looks really cute. So honestly, I might like wear the wrong side on purpose. I think it just makes it one of those pieces that can be worn on both sides. that is really cool. That cannot be said for most pieces. And honestly, that just means I'm putting in one garment's worth of effort and I am basically getting two, which is wonderful and great and makes me even more excited to have the finished object. So looking forward to how much progress I make in the next episodes. The third and final work in progress is the Field Mittens by Camilla Vard, who is, I guess, not as mainstream as My Favorite Things knitwear, but the Field Mittens has definitely popped up in the past as one of those patterns that everyone was making. I'm making this for my mom because this is basically the same color that I made her sweater number 15 in, and she has a habit of wearing gloves when driving. So I made this for her. As you can see, I finished one completely other than weaving in this end, and it's fitting my hand really decently. The problems are that, first of all, my mom has much larger hands than I have. Her hand is roughly the same length and a tiny bit longer than mine, but her fingers are much thicker and so is her palm, so this is really tight on her, and I don't think it's comfortable. But the Field Mittens come in one size and has this like grain pattern all over, so it'll be really hard to modify this into a larger size using any other method than using a bigger needle. And the problem is for that is I got a really special yarn for it. This is the blended Cashmere and Brushtail Possum down yarn by Zealana. It is 25 grams for 175 meters. It is 40% cashmere, 20% mulberry silk, and 40% possum down, which is something I have never even heard of before in yarn, and I have definitely never used. This one tiny 25-gram ball is like 30 euros, and it was a complete splurge. I got it because 30 in of itself is not a absurdly high number, and it should be enough to make one pair of gloves. It was enough. I definitely have more than half left after one glove, but this is a lace weight yarn, and sizing up any more needle sizes would make the pattern much less pretty, I guess. The second problem I have that discouraged me from finishing it is the pattern's math is really weird. I think at around the thumb end, the math was just wrong. So basically, the pattern is in a way that lays out every single stitch on a row and every single row in the pattern, since it only comes in one size. So it'll be something like knit 1, make increase, slip marker, knit 2, do this thing, do that thing, this and that, which should be fine and should be a mindless follow along knit, but for 2 of the rounds, the math didn't add up. And also the beginning of round is defined extremely loosely in the pattern, so I messed up quite a bit in the process. I had to think back a lot. And this yarn is not the most durable of them all. It broke twice, I think, in the tinking process. It is one of those that you can just like with your hands, and I've accidentally done that twice with my needles, and I really don't feel like going through all of that again, even though now I sort of remember where the mistakes are in the pattern. The third thing is purely my fault. As you can see, the parts where I am switching needles in between needles look extremely sloppy. So this is what a regular grain look like the regular grains I didn't mess up on. They look very neat, they look very organized, and the part where I did mess up on, honestly looks better on camera. But in real life, I just know that this part This part is not going well. You see the gap, you see the ladder, you see how terrible this entire thing looks. And not only that, due to the fact that the thumb increases are badly written, I'm pretty sure this is just a mistake. Like there's a mistake in the things I have done while knitting it instead of simply unneat. So I'm not liking the first glove to begin with. It doesn't fit the person that it is supposed to fit, and I am not motivated to knit a second. Now this yarn is really special, and I'd hate to see it go to waste, not just for money's sake, but also for the sake that I flew all the way to Copenhagen to get it, and also I got it with a special person in mind. So I will definitely make a pair of gloves out of this. Maybe not the field mittens. Maybe I will frog this and make it better this time knowing what I'm doing. Maybe I will somehow figure out a way to add a few more stitches into it without having to mess up the pattern, because if you size up a needle size, it will just not look good. But either way, I will make something out of it. It will not be soon. I am completely discouraged on working on this, and this will just sit in the bottom of my yarn basket for half a year until I next come back home during a school holiday, which is probably going to be around Christmas. Then I'm probably gonna be busy around Christmas, so I probably won't touch this in a year. But eventually you will see this yarn again. You probably won't see this pattern again, even though it does create a beautiful finished object if you do everything correctly and know what you're doing in advance in case you encounter any mistakes. And this is a beautiful, luxurious yarn. It is super soft, super non-scratchy. It is like premium cashmere, but even better and softer. And I can see myself looking forward to work on it again. It's just not now. I am tired. And with this tiredness and this relatively low note, that is all I have to share for today. Now, I did do quite a bit of yarn shopping in Europe. I bought a cardigan's quantity of Isager something that I don't remember what's the name of. That is apparently way more available in Europe than in North America, which should make sense because Isager is a European brand. I also bought quite a bit of hand-dyed yarns and special yarns like that, but once again, I am not in a habit of sharing planned projects that I haven't casted on in case my plans change and this and that. So unfortunately, those really exciting things will be left for the next episode. I am also really tired of talking, my throat hurts. Anyways, I hope you still enjoyed this slightly more all over the place episode. I am Lily, and I look forward to seeing you again in my next episode where much more exciting things will happen. Thank you, and see you around.